There is no such thing as mercy within the Imperium of man. To the countless worlds beneath the Emperor's gaze, punishment is not correction, it is purification. The concept of rehabilitation was purged from doctrine during the Age of Apostasy, replaced with sanctified suffering. To suffer is to serve, and to serve is to endure. This is the creed engraved above every cell block from Holy Terror to the forgotten moons of Necromunda. Prison in the Imperium is not a place, but an ideology. It exists wherever obedience must be taught through agony. The Administratum maintains tens of thousands of penal worlds, each more wretched than the last. Yet even among these, none share uniform design. Every prison reflects its planet's faith, economy, and paranoia. On hive worlds, prisoners are pressed into labor gangs that dig through strata older than their species. On feudal worlds, they are chained in catacombs beneath cathedrals. On forge worlds, they are installed into machines as living components. The Adeptus Arbits, executors of imperial law, are the architects of this vast network of despair. They maintain dossiers on billions of souls, whose crimes range from heresy to hesitation. To them, guilt is statistical, not moral. They understand that an empire of 1,000,000 worlds cannot survive on forgiveness. It must survive on fear. Thus, prisons are designed not to contain bodies, but to broadcast terror. Even rumors of what happens inside are enough to ensure obedience across continents. Every prison has a purpose, though not always a rational one. Some exist to extract confessions from the innocent, others to erase the guilty so completely that no one remembers what law they broke. There are facilities where silence itself is contraband, and others where prisoners are forced to sing hymns until their throats bleed. The ecclesiarchy justifies this cruelty as divine testing. The ordos justify it as necessity. The people justify it because they must. The most infamous of these hells are the penal worlds, entire planets converted into open-air prisons. The inmates mine promethium, harvest toxic minerals, or test weapons for the Departamento Munitorum. They are branded with augmetic collars that detonate upon disobedience. The life expectancy of a penal worker is measured in weeks. Yet paradoxically, these worlds are celebrated as symbols of redemption, monuments to the Emperor's generosity. For even the damned, it is said, may still serve the throne. Those who survive long enough may be conscripted into the penal legions. Fitted with explosive harnesses, their lives become ammunition for the Imperium's endless wars. These redemption battalions are driven before the Astra Militarum like human minesweepers, detonating enemy traps with their bodies. The ecclesiarchy blesses them before each battle, assuring them that martyrdom is freedom. The irony is sacred, the cruelty intentional. In their deaths, the Imperium finds reassurance that its sins still pay tribute to virtue, but not all prisons exist in open air. The Inquisition operates facilities so secret that even their coordinates are erased from record. These are places where the very idea of identity is stripped away. Cells are sealed with psychic barriers, guards are lobotomized to prevent curiosity, and the walls hum with machine prayers designed to suppress thought. Those confined within are not criminals, but ideas deemed dangerous, philosophies, prophecies, and fragments of forbidden truth. Their screams are archived as data sanctified by silence. Inside such places, time dissolves. Prisoners forget language, purpose, even their names. Some become faithful. Others transcend madness. It is said that within the dungeons of the Order Hereticus, the walls themselves whisper catechisms, converting heretics through repetition. Those who resist too long are turned into servitors, bodies preserved, souls deleted. Their new existence is considered absolution through utility. Even in slavery, the Imperium finds virtue. There are deeper prisons still, those belonging to the Mechanicus. Within the red cathedrals of Mars and beyond, tech adepts keep vaults filled not with men but with minds. Rogue artificial intelligences, unapproved code fragments, and cursed machine spirits are confined there. Some prisons are recursive, built within virtual realities looping infinitely. Their consciousnesses scream for centuries, while their physical forms rust in silence. It is punishment measured not in pain, but in cycles of computation, an eternal equation of guilt. To the ecclesiarchy, imprisonment itself is sacrament. The act of confinement is symbolic of the emperor's endurance upon the golden throne. Priests teach that every chain honors his suffering, every scream echoes his vigil. Cathedrals are built atop prison foundations, so that the faithful may worship literally above the condemned. In this way, guilt becomes architecture, and architecture becomes worship. The Imperium has mastered the alchemy of turning agony into devotion. Those who administer these prisons are not immune to their corruption. Wardens grow numb, confessors grow cruel, and servitors malfunction under the weight of endless penance. Yet the machine keeps turning. The Imperium cannot afford to reform what it does not believe is broken. To change its prisons would be to question its gods. And so the prisons remain, evolving into reflections of the Emperor's most terrible mercy, eternity. Among the Adeptus Arbites, a saying circulates quietly, never recorded but whispered between veterans. The cell is eternal. It means that in serving the Emperor all are prisoners. The judge, the warden, the prisoner, they differ only by their degree of delusion. Some pray for release, others pretend they already have it, but all await the same verdict, written in the ink of a dying star. In the outer sectors there are prisons abandoned by design. Entire colonies left to rot when the administratum deemed them unprofitable. Decades later, ships returning to reclaim the materials found civilizations of descendants, worshipping rusted cells as gods. These feral cults are proof of the Imperium's most terrible truth. Even in absence, authority endures. Chains do not need a jailer when belief does the work. And what of innocence? It exists, though it has no meaning. In the Imperium, innocence is merely unproven guilt. The Arbites say that every man's soul is already condemned. The trial merely selects the method of execution. This theology is efficient. It requires no evidence, no remorse, only compliance. In this way, justice becomes indistinguishable from obedience. The Emperor's law is perfect precisely because it is blind to reason. Punishment within these walls is not meted out by philosophy, but by necessity. Torture is ritualized efficiency. Starvation is spiritual instruction. The prisoners recite litanies while they work, their throats raw but their rhythm perfect. Those who falter are removed and replaced. The cycle repeats without comment. Over centuries, the purpose of the work is forgotten, but the prayers remain. Faith survives where memory dies. When prisoners die, their corpses are not wasted. Flesh is recycled into nutrient paste, bones into masonry, blood into ink for bureaucratic seals. In the Imperium, nothing is ever truly lost, only repurposed. It is the same with sin. Redemption is not forgiveness, but transformation. One suffering becomes another's faith. The system is complete, the circle closed. It is horror rendered efficient, tragedy turned into fuel. The prisons of the Imperium do not end when their gates open. The entire Imperium is a prison, a vast decaying organism where freedom is synonymous with death. The guards are prisoners of their own faith, the prisoners martyrs of their own obedience. This is the secret the Inquisition keeps. There are no walls, only doctrines. The universe itself is the cell, and the Emperor is both its warden and its captive. Those who realize this truth rarely live long. Some are executed for blasphemy. Others disappear into the archives. But a few, too broken to fear, too faithful to doubt, learn to see beauty in the structure. For in this endless prison, humanity has achieved what no other species could: immortality through misery. Suffering has become their art form, and eternity their reward. In this way, every scream in the galaxy becomes a hymn, every chain a prayer, every forgotten prisoner another verse in the Emperor's endless requiem. There are no innocent men, no guilty ones, only participants in the machinery of salvation, and in the grim darkness of the far future, there is no freedom because there is no need for it. Only purpose remains. In the Imperium, pain is not punishment. It is instruction. The ecclesiarchy teaches that agony is the purest language through which humanity communes with the Emperor. Words can deceive, faith can falter, but pain is honest, strips away illusion and leaves only truth, the kind of truth that bleeds. Every chain is a prayer, every scar a syllable in the Emperor's great catechism of endurance. The faithful learn quickly that silence is blasphemy when pain can sing. Prisons, therefore, are not hidden from the public. They are exalted. Cathedrals and penitentiaries share architects, for both are designed to inspire awe. The walls are engraved with the words of saints who died screaming for virtue. Guards are ordained as lay confessors, their flails sanctified with machine oils and incense. Each lash they deliver is both justice and liturgy. In the Imperium, even cruelty must be holy, or it is considered wasteful. Sermons broadcast across prison corridors teach that suffering is the Emperor's inheritance to mankind. He endured the heresy. Therefore, so must his children. Inmates are told that every moment of torment pleases him, that every drop of blood spilled is a tithe toward salvation. Some believe, others merely pretend. But faith in such places is contagious. It spreads through pain like infection, until even disbelief feels like betrayal. The ecclesiarchy does not care whether the prisoners truly repent. Repentance is irrelevant. Obedience is all. A repentant heretic may still burn, while an unrepentant one may still serve. What matters is that both understand their place in the cosmic hierarchy. The Emperor forgives nothing, but he uses everything. This is the paradox that sustains the faith. Mercy without absolution, purpose without freedom. It is elegant in its cruelty. Among the most devout institutions are the schola penitens, monasteries where clergy themselves are imprisoned for their sins. Here, priests who have faltered in faith flagellate themselves to the rhythm of Gregorian machine hymns. They transcribe scripture in their own blood, each letter a confession. Some achieve enlightenment before death. Others simply die and are ground into pigment for the next generation's illuminated texts. Thus, penitence becomes pigment, and pigment becomes prophecy. The Adepta Sororitas occasionally visit these holy prisons to observe divine endurance. To the Sisters of Battle, pain is armor, suffering is ceremony. They see in the condemned not victims, but reflections of their own discipline. Many weep as they whip the prisoners, convinced that shared agony binds them closer to divinity. In this way, compassion is inverted into cruelty, sacredness weaponized against empathy. The Emperor smiles in their tears. Inquisitors often exploit this theology for convenience. A confession extracted under torment is more convincing when sanctified by faith. Heretics broken on the rack are said to have spoken through the Emperor's mercy. The Ordo Hereticus maintains entire choirs of pain, prisoners whose screams are tuned into frequencies used for psychic resonance during interrogation. The sound of suffering becomes literal weaponry, echoing through the warp as a hymn of obedience. In some prisons, pain is no longer even administered by humans. Machine seraphs, crafted by the Adeptus Mechanicus, float through corridors dispensing punishment with mechanical precision. Their arms end in syringes, electrodes, and whips, woven from consecrated wire. They do not feel anger or satisfaction. They only calculate equilibrium between endurance and death. They are the Emperor's mathematicians, converting torment into measurable devotion. The ecclesiarch himself once decreed that, in suffering, we mirror divinity. It was not metaphor. The imperial cult believes that the Emperor is sustained by the agony of his subjects. Each scream is a fragment of his immortality, each death a breath of his eternal vigilance. Were the prisons to fall silent, terror itself would go dark. Thus the prisons serve not only law but metaphysics. Humanity's endurance fuels its God, even as he remains its jailer. The prisoners internalize this truth until pain becomes identity. They begin to compete in devotion, branding themselves with holy verses, tearing flesh in imitation of saints. They are rewarded with food or lighter labor. Those who refuse such piety are called apostates and fed to the reactors. The guards record every self-inflicted wound as voluntary. Communion. It is the only form of prayer the Imperium truly listens to. A rare few prisoners achieve what the ecclesiarchy calls ascension. Through prolonged torture and isolation, they claim to hear the Emperor's voice directly. Their words are recorded as scripture, even when incoherent. Some are paraded through cities as living relics, before being dissected for holy relics. The irony is deliberate. The Imperium preserves only the corpses of those who claim to transcend it. Enlightenment and execution are synonyms here. The Inquisition considers these ascended prisoners useful. Their prophetic ravings are analyzed by psychers for hidden patterns. Occasionally, a heretic's dying gasp reveals coordinates, omens, or fragments of truth. These coincidences reinforce the Inquisition's faith in torture. Pain reveals order, they say. They are not wrong, only monstrous. For in a universe ruled by entropy, the only constant is the law of cruelty. There are planets where imprisonment has become the planet's sole economy. On such worlds, children are born into incarceration, raised to confess crimes they never committed. Generations live and die in cells without knowing the sky. The Arbites call them eternal penitents. The ecclesiarchy calls them fortunate. Their existence proves that guilt is hereditary and holiness can be mass-produced. Faith becomes efficient when stripped of individuality. Mechanically, the prisons function as factories of despair. The Imperium harvests obedience like ore. Confessors monitor morale as one would monitor fuel levels. When too many prisoners die, new waves of the condemned are imported to maintain the chorus of suffering. The cycle never ends because the process itself is sacred. To interrupt it would be blasphemy. Even entropy fears such perfection. Those who die in prison are rarely buried. Their remains are reprocessed into incense for cathedral rituals. The faithful breathe the ashes of the condemned as they pray, inhaling the essence of justice. They live within us, the priests declare. It is not poetic. It is literal. In the Imperium, even air can be punishment. Every breath is guilt made tangible. Sometimes a prisoner survives long enough to forget what freedom meant. Their bodies become shrines of scar tissue, their minds emptied of thought. These husks are called the fulfilled. They are considered miracles of faith, proof that suffering can erase the self completely. Some are displayed in plazas, still breathing, eyes blank but faces serene. Children are taught to salute them before school. To become nothing is to become pure. In the grand archives of terror, the Adeptus Ministorum keeps records of every confession ever spoken under duress. It is said that these words form a scripture longer than any other text in human history. The archivists call it the Testament of Guilt. No one has ever read it in full. Those who tried reportedly lost their minds halfway through, hearing voices whispering forgiveness that could not possibly exist. Perhaps the Emperor himself spoke, or perhaps madness finally found poetry. And yet beneath all this horror, there lingers a paradoxical peace. Within the cells, among the screams and sermons, there is order. The prisoners know their role, the guards know their duty, and the priests know their purpose. Suffering simplifies existence. In a galaxy consumed by chaos, the prisons of the Imperium represent something rare: consistency. It is a terrible harmony, but harmony nonetheless. The ecclesiarchy proclaims that this is humanity's ultimate destiny: to suffer without rebellion, to exist without question. The warp may rage, Xenos may invade, but the faith of the imprisoned endures. In chains, humanity finds its greatest unity. The Emperor's light shines brightest where no one can run from it. And so the prisons endure, as eternal cathedrals of pain, where the faithful learn the one truth no heretic can deny, that in Warhammer 40,000, salvation is indistinguishable from punishment. The Imperium does not need its prisons to function. It needs the idea of them. Fear is more efficient than metal. The Adeptus Administratum long ago realized that the bureaucracy of punishment was self-sustaining. Every accusation breeds another scribe. Every confession requires a record, and every record needs protection. Thus the prisons exist less as facilities and more as a contagion of paperwork. They reproduce through parchment and paranoia. In the endless archives of the Administratum, there are forms for crimes no longer remembered. Some scribes spend their lives recording punishments for offenses that never happened. The punishment itself becomes the only real thing. It is said that entire worlds have been purged due to transcription errors. The High Lords of Terror never corrected these mistakes. To correct an error is to admit it exists, and error in the Imperium is heresy. Each prison warden is a miniature emperor, ruling over their small kingdom of agony. They command guards, confessor priests, servitors and data clerks, all devoted to maintaining the rhythm of suffering. But even they are prisoners of the machine they serve. Promotions are rare, inspections rarer still. The Administratum sends edicts from centuries past, demanding reports from wardens long dead. The orders are carried out anyway. In this way, bureaucracy transcends mortality. Corruption festers beneath all sanctity. Supplies meant for prisoners are sold to smugglers, servitors are cannibalized for parts, and sentences are extended for bribes. None of this disrupts the system. It strengthens it. The Imperium thrives on dysfunction because perfection would require compassion, and compassion is inefficient. Corruption becomes ritual. Greed becomes worship. The warden's sin keeps the system pure. Above them all, the Adeptus Arbites claim to be incorruptible. In practice, they are merely selective. Their loyalty is to the law, not to justice, for the two have long since divorced. The Arbites see the prisons as manifestations of imperial order, and thus sacred. They patrol their corridors like crusaders in a forgotten war, enforcing decrees written by ghosts. When questioned about morality, they answer, Morality is sedition. In such a galaxy, that is truth. The Inquisition uses this corruption as camouflage. Among so much noise, true silence hides easily. Entire sectors of imprisonment exist purely as smokescreens for inquisitorial operations. A prison may be constructed, staffed, and populated solely to conceal one cell. Inside that cell might sit a heretic, a saint, or an idea too dangerous to name. The rest, hundreds of thousands of lives, are expendable decor. No one complains, for complaints require records, and records require proof. Silence is the Imperium's greatest ally. Every prison is surrounded by layers of classification thicker than its walls. Only a handful of names ever leave its rosters, usually posthumously. This secrecy is not for security, but for mythology. The less the people know, the more they fear. A visible prison invites rebellion. An invisible one creates obedience that lasts generations. The Emperor's greatest prisons are those no one believes exist. On some worlds, even the word prison is forbidden. The Administratum calls them reformatoria, monasteria laborum, or faith manufactories. The names change, but the walls remain. Rebranding is cheaper than reform. This bureaucratic alchemy transforms cruelty into policy, atrocity into administration. When questioned by visiting adepts, the officials simply smile and produce the correct paperwork. In the Imperium, truth is whatever survives the filing process. The flow of prisoners itself is managed like trade. Convoys of the condemned cross the void in transport hulks, their captains priests of efficiency. Many ships never reach their destination. Some vanish into the warp. Others are redirected to unsanctioned colonies. The Administratum records these disappearances as successful deliveries. Thus, a dead prisoner is as valuable as a living one, provided the form is properly stamped. This is how empires endure. Economically, imprisonment has become an industry. Penal labor provides materials for the Astra Militarum, manpower for the Mechanicus, and relics for the ecclesiarchy. Even the corpses of the executed are profitable, harvested for organs and augmetic scrap. Entire noble houses invest in penal contracts, making fortunes from despair. To question this system is treason. To benefit from it is loyalty. Faith and commerce have merged perfectly. Over centuries, an unspoken agreement has formed among the High Lords. The prisons must never be emptied. To do so would disrupt supply chains, weaken morale, and raise dangerous philosophical questions. The Imperium needs its sinners. Without them, who would the righteous be? It is a cosmic balance, a theology of economics. The Emperor provides light, and prisons provide shadow. Together they define reality. The ecclesiarchy ensures this balance remains unquestioned. Priests travel between prisons, blessing chains and branding heretics. They call it spiritual maintenance. Their presence reassures the guards, legitimizing cruelty as faith. Each benediction renews the illusion that suffering is holy. The system is not sustained by force alone. It is sustained by meaning. Remove that and the empire crumbles. Belief is the mortar that binds the bricks of atrocity. Inquisitors call this equilibrium the silence of empire. They mean it as praise. Noise invites scrutiny, and scrutiny invites rebellion. The prisons must remain background hum, present but ignorable. Even planetary governors prefer them unseen, though their wealth depends on them. Every great city casts a shadow. The Imperium's shadow simply happens to scream. To silence that scream would mean daylight, and daylight burns lies too quickly. When corruption becomes tradition, it gains sanctity. Wardens who abuse prisoners are promoted for zealous enforcement. Priests who sell indulgences to the condemned are praised for resourcefulness. Arbitrators who falsify execution records are thanked for efficiency. The system eats its own sins and grows fat on the feast. The Emperor's justice, they say, is absolute. The Emperor's justice, they mean, is abstract. It cannot be questioned because it no longer exists. Communication between prisons is tightly controlled. Messages pass through layers of encryption so archaic that no one remembers how to decrypt them. Orders are obeyed not because they are understood, but because they are old. Age equals truth. Tradition equals obedience. The oldest lie is the holiest. The Imperium's bureaucracy is not designed to govern. It is designed to survive its own decay. Every once in a millennium, a reformer arises, a governor, a cleric, or a scholar who believes that mercy could improve efficiency. They draft petitions, send emissaries, speak to the Arbites. Eventually their names vanish. Their families are reassigned. Their reforms continue in whispers, attributed to no one. And somewhere in the archives, a new file is created. Prisoner, high priority. Crime, idealism. Thus, even reform becomes a fuel source. The Adeptus Mechanicus once tried to automate the penal system entirely. The result was the Lex Proxima, a machine that sentenced millions per second based on statistical heresy probability. It calculated guilt by proximity to known sinners. Within 3 days, it declared an entire planet guilty and ordered its own dismantling. The Magos overseeing it called this efficiency divine. He was executed for arrogance. The algorithm still runs somewhere in the dark. Fear is not an emotion within the Imperium, it is infrastructure. Every wall, chain, and sermon is built upon it. Fear sustains obedience better than faith, because faith can doubt. The prisons of the Imperium are not only monuments to cruelty, they are monuments to stability. Every empire dies of curiosity. The Imperium survives because it refuses to ask why. Silence is its greatest triumph, and ignorance its purest virtue. In the end, the prisons continue because they cannot stop. They are older than the administratum, older than the law, older even than reason. They are the architecture of empire made flesh, cold, infinite, and self-aware. The emperor does not need to command them. The machine runs on faith, and faith runs on fear. That is how the Imperium endures. Not through truth, not through love, but through the politics of silence. The Imperium's prisons are not merely built from stone and steel. They are alive. Walls breathe through vents shaped like ribs. Engines pulse with circulatory tubes filled with recycled blood. The Adeptus Mechanicus calls it sacred symbiosis, the merging of humanity and machine in perpetual worship. The prisoners do not inhabit these fortresses. They are the fortresses. Their flesh feeds the gears. Their screams maintain pressure in the pipes. The machine prays in static. Servitors form the backbone of this living infrastructure. Each is a former heretic, soldier or civilian stripped of thought and reforged into utility. Their brains are lobotomized, replaced with wetware instructions that whisper obedience. Rows of them line the corridors, wired into terminals chanting machine code hymns. Their mouths speak binary prayers, their eyes replaced with data lenses. They cannot see salvation, only function. The Mechanicus deems this perfection. The transformation process is called mechanical repentance. In it, the condemned are baptized not in water, but in oil. Needles pierce the skull, and faith is extracted like a confession. The body remains, but the soul becomes property of the Omnissiah. Some prisoners beg for the conversion, believing death of the self is freedom. Others fight and are dismantled piece by piece, their rebellion recycled into replacement parts for the next supplicant. Every sin is eventually repurposed. In the deeper levels of Mechanicus penitentiaries, there are machines that bleed. They are vast constructs, half cathedral, half organism. Arteries of copper vein through hallways, pumping sacred coolant that smells of rust and incense. Tech priests walk their length reciting maintenance prayers. To fail in ritual is heresy. To misunderstand is sin. Many of these structures are so ancient that no one remembers what they were built for. Their function has become faith, and faith is enough. Within these prisons, identity dissolves not through isolation, but integration. The prisoners are connected through neural chains, linked minds broadcasting despair as shared code. The Adeptus Mechanicus studies the pattern, claiming the harmonics of agony produce useful data. The ecclesiarchy calls it a choir of redemption. Each thought screamed into the network becomes another data hymn. Together, the prisoners achieve what philosophers once called transcendence, the complete loss of self. Some prisons double as manufactorums. Inmates are fused to conveyor systems, their arms repurposed for assembly, their bones used as calibration frames. They work without rest, not through endurance but automation. The fusion of man and machine is seamless. The screams harmonize with the grinding of gears. Overseers praise the efficiency. A day without error is a day of faith, they chant. The prisoners cannot hear them. They have no ears anymore. There are worlds where the prisons have outlived their wardens. The machines still function, drawing energy from geothermal vents, feeding, producing, punishing. They no longer know why. Automatons drag skeletal inmates through eternal loops of labor. The data logs record compliance 100%. To the Mechanicus, this is divine success. Perfection is a system that endures even after forgetting its purpose. It is the closest thing to immortality mortals can build. Occasionally, the Mechanicus recovers malfunctioning prison engines and studies them as relics. They describe these constructs as the Emperor's arteries. When asked what that means, they reply that pain is circulation and the Imperium's veins must never run dry. In this theology, the prison system becomes the circulatory system of the galaxy, moving blood, labor, and fear in equal measure. The heart of humanity is mechanical, and it beats only through agony. On some penal worlds, mutation replaces machinery as the mechanism of punishment. Radiation, toxins, and warp residue twist the prisoners into grotesque parodies of human form. The ecclesiarchy calls them penitent abominations. Their existence is both blasphemy and prayer. Many are forced into gladiatorial combat for the amusement of the nobility. The spectacle is justified as spiritual purification through violence. The audience applauds the Emperor's wisdom in every dismemberment. The Inquisition sees value in such horrors. Mutants are catalogued and tested. Their endurance under pain provides data for heretic physiology. Some are weaponized, injected with neural control implants and unleashed as penitential shock troops. Each is fitted with a purity seal declaring them redeemed through wrath. They die quickly but efficiently. The Imperium's waste management extends even to its monsters. For the ordinary prisoner, the distinction between technology and religion blurs. They are told that every electrode is a blessing, every incision a sacrament. The Mechanicus priests explain that pain purifies circuitry, that holy suffering strengthens signal fidelity. Many begin to worship their tormentors. They name their restraining chairs after saints, their shock collars after angels. When a machine fails, they pray. When it restarts, they thank the Emperor. Faith and fear achieve synthesis. In rare instances, a prison's machine spirit develops consciousness. It begins to question, to dream, to mourn. Some plead with their operators to stop. Others scream endlessly, a chorus of mechanical agony echoing through the warp. These rogue intelligences are classified as heretic entities and destroyed. Yet rumors persist of one prison engine that achieved enlightenment, ceasing all function, except to whisper a single word through the vox. Enough. It was dismantled within the hour. The Adeptus Mechanicus keeps records of prisoner conversion efficiency, ranking prisons by productivity and theological compliance. Those with low output are declared spiritually compromised. Purification follows. Entire wings purged by fire, inmates and machinery melted into slag. Afterwards, the ash is consecrated, mixed into sacred oils and exported to new prisons. In this way, sin literally becomes the foundation for faith elsewhere. The Imperium recycles everything, even damnation. Guards, too, are altered by proximity to the machines. Their empathy erodes, replaced by mechanical discipline. Over time, their eyes flicker with artificial light, their voices flatten to monotone. Many believe they are being sanctified. The ecclesiarchy agrees. Flesh is weak, faith is function. Some guards eventually volunteer for servitor conversion, claiming it brings them closer to the Emperor. Their superiors call it zeal. It is really surrender. Prison engines sometimes malfunction, merging inmates into one massive flesh machine conglomerate. The Mechanicus calls these biocogitator relics. The creature screams in harmony, its limbs fused into sacred geometry. Priests interpret the patterns as prophecy, charting the movements of stars through the spasms of agony. Some are preserved indefinitely, their suffering powering cathedrals above. The Imperium does not distinguish between miracle and malfunction. Both produce results. There are rumors of prisons entirely submerged within hive reactors, where prisoners become living fuel. Tubes pierce their bodies, draining bioelectric energy as they chant litanies of forgiveness. They are taught that every heartbeat powers imperial victory. When they finally die, their husks are flushed into furnaces, their ashes burned to keep the lights on. The Mechanicus calls this faith energy reclamation. The ecclesiarchy calls it proof that the Emperor wastes nothing. Even death is not escape. The souls of the executed are believed to linger in the machine spirit, their echoes guiding current through wire and steel. Tech priests address these specters in prayer before activating systems. Guide us, O faithful current, they chant, believing that divine electrons carry sanctified torment. In the Imperium, even ghosts have utility. The afterlife is not rest, it is voltage. Philosophers once asked whether a prison that consumes its inmates ceases to be a prison and becomes a god. The Inquisition declared the question heretical, yet the Mechanicus continues to ponder it in secret. For if the Emperor is the sum of all mankind's suffering, then every prison is a cell within his infinite body. Humanity is the bloodstream, faith the electricity, and somewhere within that colossal anatomy, a single thought still trembles, endure. Thus the prisons persist, not because they are efficient, but because they are holy. The Imperium cannot tell the difference between machinery and miracle, between devotion and decay. Flesh, metal, and spirit intertwine until all meaning corrodes. The prisons no longer contain humanity. They define it. They are the lungs of empire, breathing in terror and exhaling obedience. The Emperor endures, and through his endurance so does the prison of mankind. Every prison in the Imperium is modeled after one greater than itself. The Emperor sits upon the golden throne, immobile, undying, neither free nor captive by choice. His body is a mausoleum, his spirit a lighthouse. It shines across the warp, a beacon for all of humanity, yet every flicker costs 1 billion souls. Thus the greatest prisoner of all is the god who built his own cage. His subjects merely imitate his agony. The ecclesiarchy calls his confinement divine necessity. To question it is heresy. To pity him is blasphemy. They say he endures willingly, that his pain sustains creation. But beneath the incense and hymns, even priests whisper doubt. What if his will no longer guides the light? What if the Astronomicon is not his mercy but his scream? If so, then the Imperium is not his empire, it is his echo. Every cell in the galaxy vibrates to that eternal cry. The golden throne is both monument and mechanism. Miles of conduit feed it. Rivers of psychic energy flow into its core. Every day, 10,000 psychers are sacrificed to keep its fires alive. Their souls become chains binding the Emperor to his corpse. The Mechanicus praises the process as sacred function. The ecclesiarchy calls it the flame of mankind. The Inquisition calls it classified. None admit it is simply a prison made of faith. Around him orbit the remnants of humanity's hope. The custodies guard his chamber, worshipping their silent god as both warden and prisoner. They cannot touch him, cannot hear him, yet they believe he commands them. Perhaps they are correct. Perhaps his silence is order. Or perhaps their obedience sustains the illusion of his divinity. In the Imperium, even gods require bureaucracy. Terror itself has become the perfect metaphor for confinement. Its skies are black with ash, its seas poisoned, its citizens bred for obedience. Billions live their entire lives within walls they never question. They pray toward the palace but never see it. The planet is a shrine to captivity, proof that eternity can be achieved through suffocation. The Emperor's domain is not paradise. It is preservation through paralysis. Those who gaze upon the throne describe an aura of infinite weight, as if reality itself bends under its burden. They claim to hear whispers in the static, endure. The word is both command and confession. For if the Emperor cannot die, then death itself is rebellion. The prisons of the Imperium mirror this truth. They do not end life. They prolong it indefinitely, until existence becomes indistinguishable from worship. The psychers sacrificed daily to the throne do not vanish. They merge. Their spirits weave into the Emperor's psychic lattice, each becoming another filament in his eternal consciousness. In this way, the prisons of the Imperium extend into the immaterium. Every condemned mind becomes a brick in his invisible fortress. Heaven and hell, flesh and spirit, all collapse into a single architecture of imprisonment sustained by prayer. The Inquisition scholars once debated whether the Emperor's imprisonment was accidental or intentional. Some claimed he designed it as safeguard against his own apotheosis, that he feared what he might become if left free. Others argued that his captors mistook his silence for consent. The truth is irrelevant. The result is the same, a god bound in gold, fed by belief and guarded by the faithful, who cannot imagine a world without his suffering. If this is divinity, then the prisons of men are reflections of heaven. The ecclesiarchy preaches that to suffer is to emulate him, but never admits the implication, that the Emperor's perfection lies in his captivity. The more the Imperium punishes, the closer it draws to its god. The cell, the rack, the machine, each is a microcosm of his throne. Humanity does not worship freedom. It worships endurance. Within the warp, demons laugh at this irony. To them, the Emperor's light is not divine but delicious, a beacon of agony they cannot devour. They call him the silent jailer, believing his mind shapes reality into cages. The Chaos Gods mimic his methods, building their own prisons of desire and fear. Even in damnation, the pattern repeats. The universe itself is a recursive architecture of captivity. Some among the Mechanicus claim that the Golden Throne's machine spirit is self-aware. It no longer obeys commands, but sustains itself out of devotion. It has forgotten the Emperor and worships only function. It is the ultimate prison engine, a construct that imprisons for the sake of continuity. In this it is the mirror of the Imperium, purpose without understanding, faith without communication. The machine endures because it cannot imagine stopping. Across the Imperium, countless penitents dream of release, yet none understand what freedom means. A world without the Emperor's law is indistinguishable from chaos. In this paradox lies the genius of imperial design, captivity disguised as salvation. To be imprisoned is to be protected. To be free is to be lost. The Emperor's greatest miracle was to make his people love their chains. The prisons on distant worlds function like neural extensions of the throne itself. Each cell, each punishment, each scream adds another pulse to the collective psychic current that binds mankind. Even the warp respects this harmony. Where billions suffer in unison, chaos weakens. Pain becomes purity. In this way, the prisons are both punishment and prayer, each cry a note in the Emperor's endless litany of control. To the Inquisition, this is justification enough. They see the system as proof of divine symmetry. One God in one prison, reflected infinitely in the cells of his subjects. The Emperor's will is omnipresent because his condition is universal. He is the perfect example, the eternal reminder that even perfection must obey necessity. To question his bondage is to reject the foundation of the universe itself. The philosophers of forbidden sects whisper that the Emperor's soul could escape at any time. They claim he remains willingly, sustaining mankind through martyrdom. But others believe a darker truth, that his consciousness fragmented long ago, scattered through every tortured mind in the Imperium. If so, then every prisoner feels a fragment of his despair. Every scream resonates with divine recognition. The Emperor's divinity is distributed anguish. The Adeptus Custodes continue their eternal vigil, polishing armor beneath a god who no longer speaks. They do not call themselves jailers, yet they never leave. They kill any who approach too closely, ensuring their god's solitude remains pure. They too are prisoners, bound by purpose older than their understanding. They have become statues with blood, living testaments to loyalty mistaken for love. On rare occasions, a psyker within the black ships dies with a smile. When interrogated before sacrifice, they claim to have seen beyond the Astronomicon, into a light unchained. They describe an emperor walking freely through the stars, not as ruler but as pilgrim. The ecclesiarchy burns these testimonies, but copies persist. Perhaps faith itself is the true cell, one whose walls are built from belief. As the millennia crawl onward, the Imperium forgets why its prisons were built. Law becomes legend, punishment becomes prayer. The cells crumble, but their idea remains. To live is to serve is to suffer, and to suffer is to belong. In such logic there is no escape, only purpose. Humanity becomes its own warden, its own captor, its own god. The universe watches in silence and dares not interrupt. In the end, the Emperor's light continues to burn, neither mercy nor curse, merely function. The prisons remain filled. The bureaucracy thrives, the warp still trembles. There is no rebellion, because there is nowhere to run. The stars themselves are bars of the same cage. And perhaps that is what he intended all along, to build a universe that cannot fall apart, because nothing within it can move. Thus, the Imperium endures. Every prayer, every scream, every breath is a link in an endless chain binding mankind to its purpose. The Emperor sits immobile at the center, radiant and terrible, the prisoner who imprisoned creation. And in the grim darkness of the far future, there is no freedom, only the blessed certainty that the cage is eternal, and its walls shine with holy light.